This is parallel track, the commercializing innovation and ARTPARK Spark. What we'll discuss today is the user model and how you can look at and understand who the users are. Right? So just to do a recap, this is what we did last two times. Actually, we looked at this twice, so you'll now know, right? So 1090 startup, basically IT Madras, figured out a phase change material, wanted to build a business around it, did a lot of interviews, user research interviews, to understand who the customers are, who the potential users are, right? And next thing what they did was to understand which of these possible scenarios or use cases, which are the possible customers they should go after, and they use something equivalent of the activity matrix to figure out, where different use cases lie, and that helps them to understand, which one is a better option for them. Right? So that we've done all this, so I'm just giving a quick uh, recap so that we can start from there. Now, this is good, but this is not enough, because what you need to do is to also figure out what is the market size, right? And what we discussed last time was that there's a bottom-up way of doing market size, which typically gives you a better understanding of who your customers are and how large the market size is, right? And the formula for that is you look at your product, you look at number of potential customers in that's number of users, number of times they will purchase your product or how frequently they'll purchase the product. That's the number of unbundling activities. And the last is how much money can you make per activity, right? These numbers come from what is already prevalent in the industry, right? Because typically when you enter a industry with a new product, the customers or the users will already be doing something. It's not like there's a new problem for them. They will be trying to solve it somehow, and your product will be a better product, right? So therefore there's an anchor. So you have to go stick to the anchor, whatever the pricing there is. Right? And what we discussed last time was that the number of users correspond to number of customers or users with above threshold pain point, right? The example of the autonomous air ambulance, one of the important things is not number of ambulances in India, but number of people who will be willing to use air ambulance specifically, which gets you to the hospital quickly within 1 hour, let's say. So that kind of restricts it to a smaller subset of problems, which is, let's say, heart attack or a big injury that for which you need to get to hospital quickly. Right? So above threshold pain point is very important. The other two, I think, are more clear. I think we just need to look at how many times people naturally do this, that particular activity, and how much money currently they pay for the products, equivalent product in the market. Right? And for this particular example, for this particular top right, for the ice cream example, if we want to do this bottom-up calculation, the way we would do is to look at number of users. Number of users in this case would be number of delivery partners, right? Number of people with Swiggy, Zomato, and so on, who are delivering food, right? Each of them, let's say, has to have this thing which a customer, when they order something cold or hot, they want to bring it hot or cold to them, right? So there are, as of today, there are roughly 1 million delivery partners all put together. Number of unbundling activity in this case is 1, because you can give them this box, and that's what you can give them, right? They will not need 2, more than 1. So that's 1. And this is a bit of uncertain number, the last one, which is revenue per activity. As of today, roughly, when a Zomato or Swiggy person comes to you and deliver food, roughly that company, Swiggy, would pay them between 30 and 50 rupees for that one delivery. Right? So you can say if that's the cost per delivery of then how much can you charge extra if you were to give them this special, ice cream, whatever, the cold storage box, right? It typically, an input cost into a system is not more than 10 to 20%. Right? So let's say it's 20%. Let's say it's on a higher end, right? So 20% of 50 rupees is 10 rupees. Right? So 10 rupees into roughly, let's say every delivery person has this box with them, right? That's 10 rupees into 1 million. That's 10 million rupees, right? Which is 1 crore rupees, right? So the question therefore becomes, is this a good thing to do or is it not a good thing to do? Any responses, reactions? 1 crore, if your business can make 1 crore per year, right? Is that a good business? Is that not a good business? Huh? It, Okay, so one is it depends and depends on manufacturing cost or other things, and you said no, not a good. Why is that not a good business?
Because if we take the gross margin, it should be significant enough.
We don't yet know what the margins are. I think it's a similar question that remark from this side saying it depends on the input cost. So my response to this is it typically is not a good number. 1 crore or 10 crore is not a good number, size of the market, right? And this is where we stopped last time, and which is I wanted to pick it up from there. The reason it's not good is two reasons. One, from your point of view, and second, from investors' point of view. From your point of view, from you as a founder's point of view, it will typically take 7 to 10 years to build a large business, right? 7 to 10 years, you look at that, look at how much salary you will be earning and what are you giving up here, right? Let's say it will take 2-3 years, during which time you will not be earning too much or making, your income, you will subsidize, so to say, and you'll give yourself less salary, right? So the question really becomes, at the end of that 10-year period or 7-year period, how much money will you be making, right? That's the revenue that your company will be generating. That's number one point. And related to that is how large can this business become, right? So that's from your point of view. And there's the other point of view, which is what does the investor want, right? And let me tell you what does the investor want, right? So before I tell you what does investor want, let's look at how do investors operate, right? So let's say you go to VC venture capitalists like Axel, right? They typically don't invest their own money, right? Actually, no VC invests their own money. They raise money from someone else. Those people are called LPs, limited partners, right? Now, limited partners, the reason they put money into VC firms is because they are expecting or they are trying to diversify their returns. So let's say one of the investor, for example, LPs into Axel is Welcome Trust, one of the large healthcare non-profit organization, right? So that's a few $1 billion. They will put some money in the public markets, but just to diversify, they will also put money in alternate investment vehicles like Axel, right? So they would so if they give money to Axel will return money to them in 10 or 12 years, because that's how long it takes for a startup to become large, right? That's how long it took for Swiggy, for example, from 2014 to start to 2024 to IPO. So 10 years window typically it takes for a company to start to get to a place where they can get an exit. So the typical formula is that you want to return 3x returns over that 10 to 12 year period. Why 3x returns? Because if you look at public markets, Indian public market, let's say, how much do you get? Annually, how much does public markets increase in India? Anyone has any idea? Sorry? 12 to 14%, right? So if let's say it's a 12% increase every year, the normal formula is if it's 12% increase, every 6 years it will double, your money will double, right? So if this 12 years, so 6 into 6, the money will become 4x, right? So if you just put the money in public markets, it will become 4x. So if you want to put money in a VC firm and it's a less liquid firm, your money is locked in for those 12 years, you would expect it to at least beat that number, because why would otherwise you put money here, right? So that's basically why it's a 3x. Is actually on the low. Actually, 3x is what is a average number, because US markets give lesser returns. Indian market gives 12%, but US markets, the public markets give lower returns, which is why 3x is considered a good number, right? Now, if you have to give 3x return, then the question becomes, how would you give that to your customers, right? So let's look at this. This is what happens in the real life, right? This is a research done by, you can see the source, right? They looked at all the VC firms, and they said, how many of these VC firms return the money back to their investors, right? It is surprising, or maybe not surprising, because doing startup is a risky business. We saw 85% companies don't survive. 60% or so VCs do not return the money, not even the money they took from the LPs back to them. So they actually make losses. Right? That's how risky this business is. Around 30% of the investors, VCs, return, roughly 3x. Actually, no, this is not, it doesn't say the 3x. 60% don't return anything, 30% return 1x or more, and roughly 10% VCs, that's all across the world, return 3x or more money. Right? So that's how risky the business is, right? Now, yeah.
They're online, they're not able to hear.
Oh, okay. So it's a silent movie for them. They can. I'm like Kamal Hassan. Going through the full 3 hours without them. म्यूट तो नहीं किया था
Not in Zoom.
क्या नहीं जूम पे ही शेयर किया है
Zoom पे चल रहा है.
हाँ हाँ जूम पे है ना ये
Okay, got it. Got you. I hope people are able to hear online.
चेक करो आई थॉट अक्षता सेड दे कैन हियर ये ठीक है ना इसको
हाँ,
वापस
this fine.
ओके
Yeah, now they can.
they can hear okay okay so we'll repeat this particular slide not go back to previous slides
We lost you for 30 seconds or so.
oh okay okay okay
It's working.
that's good then okay so just to recap now normally VCs take money from LPs they want to return money to LPs typically 3x or more money needs to be returned to LPs so that they are profitable and LPs sorry VCs okay if you look at all the VCs across the world 60% or more so VCs do not return the money back to LPs 30% return 1x returns and 10% do 10x or more returns right so that's basically how skewed the thing is now if there's a VC who says okay I need to do 10x I need to do 3x return overall and in general my most of my startups are going to give me 0 right and 30% will give me 4x right and only 10% will give me 10x then if you multiply those numbers I have assumed this to be 4x right because this is the public markets thing that we did double every 6 years therefore 4 times in 12 years so the 4x so 60% into 0 30% of the companies will give you 4x returns and 10% gives 10x returns, right? So the number comes to 2.2x. So actually that's not even meeting the 3x requirement, right? So which is why VCs are looking always for startups which can give them 10x or more return on that one startup, right? So that's the thing. But why still 1 billion number? We last time I mentioned that the minimum market size typically is considered to be 1 billion or more, right? Why 1 billion, right? We know that 1/10 will return 10x or more, but still why 1 billion? So let's look at a small fund, let's say, which is a 50 million fund, right? So if you look at Indian deep tech startups, there is Special Invest, there's Pi Ventures, there is Yali Capital, there's Pavestone, there's Navam Capital. Roughly, they are in the 100 million or so range, right? They all started in this 30 to 50 million range, right? So let's say there's a 50 million fund, right? One of these funds which just got started, right? Now for that fund to return 3x return, right? Their question therefore becomes how much should they invest, right? So typically VCs want to de-risk themselves, so they will not put all the money in one startup, right? So for a 50 million fund, you can expect them to have around 20 startups that they'll invest in. Right? So 50 divided by 20 is 2.5 million. Roughly, they will not invest more than 2.5 million in one startup. Right? So that let's say that's what they do. Right? So they would put in money in these 20 startups. In each of those startups, they will want to take some stake, which at the end of the 10-year period or 12-year period, they would want to have 6% or 5% equity in that company. So for example, when Swiggy went IPO, Axel Partners, which was one of the first investors into that, had roughly 6%. Right? So this number is roughly what happens if you have many rounds of fundraise subsequently. Right? So 5% stake at the end of it. Now, if you need to return 50 million or 3x of all 50 million, let's say, but let's say 50, right? Then what the value of that company at the time of exit should be 1 million into 5%. If those two multiply, you'll get 50 million, right? Therefore, this number needs to be at least a billion. If this number needs to be at least a billion, then the next set of calculations, if this has to be at least billion, the revenue has to be at least 100 million because in markets, in private markets, typically you get 10x returns. Actually, in public markets also, you get 5 to 10x return depending on how fast the company is growing and how large the market is. So assume 10x, which is optimistic, or in good times this is a real number. So 10x, if you get multiple, then your revenue has to be at least 100 million, right? The example that we had was 10 what was it, 10 million, which is 1 crore, right, for 1090, right? So that is not 1 crore or 10 crore is 1 million. It has to be 100 times more than that, right? Then next one is why this? If you had to make this much money, then what should be the size of the market? This, if we assume you can get 10% of the market, then the market size has to be at least $1 billion, right? Does it make sense? So this is the bottom up calculation. If the market size is 1 billion and you can take 10% of the market, then your revenues will be 100 million. If your revenues are 100 million and you're growing fast, then you can get 10x multiple, right? If you multiply these two, your value of the company at the time of exit will be around $1 billion. If VCs hold 5% of that, then they'll do 50 million return. Now they will be looking out of the 20 they have invested in, let's say 2.5 million into 20, that's 50. Right? If they invested 2.5, if they invested in 20 companies, they will be looking for at least 3 such companies to return 3x money back to their LPs. Right? Which is why if you go to any investor, they will always say, what's the market size? And you say less than 1 billion, they will start asking you questions. Right? Now the problem is the investors like Axel, Peak 15, Lightspeed, whatever, or the deep tech VCs, they are the ones for the seed investors or angel investors get their exit when the larger investors put in money. Therefore, even the seed investors and angel investors start looking at this market size, right? Because they can only get exit when a larger VC, when an institutional VC puts in money. So if the institutional VC will not put in money if market is smaller than 1 billion, even the seed investors don't want to put in money if the market is less than 1 billion. Right? So that's the reason why it all adds up to saying 1 billion or more should be the market size. Right? Make sense? Any questions? All right. Online also, if they have any, we can check. Yeah. Because I can't see them here. Yeah.
What's the difference between this Excel and institutional?
No, same thing. That's what I mean. So what I'm differentiating between Axel, Peak 15, and all of these, which are typically more on the consumer tech and business side, and deep tech investors, also institutional investors like Pi Ventures, Special Invest, and all of them. These are all institutional investors. Before them, you raise money from smaller individuals, right? Consortiums or smaller things. Those are non-institutional. I'm calling them non-institutional. So if you go to, let's say, if you pitch your idea and Nandan Nilekani says, this is a wonderful idea, I want to support you, or, he will, or, Kiran Mazumdar Shah, she will say, okay, take money, because I like your idea, this should be done. So those are angel investors. Now they also look at these guys saying, if I put in the money, will this company eventually raise VC money? If and which will it eventually get an exit? Because they will get money only when the exit happens. So therefore, these individuals then start looking at this market size also. So that's those individuals are non-institutional, and everyone else who has raised money, those are institutional investors.
So the 15 million fund is right at the beginning, the seed fund.
50 million fund is the fund size. Yeah. So all of these investors typically, Axel has 650 million, Sequoia has 2.2 billion. Those are large guys. If you look at the deep tech investors, Special Invest, Pi Ventures, all of them, they are around 100 million fund size.
Sir, are family offices also institutional or non-institutional?
Family offices are in between the two. Family offices typically do not have to return money to back to their LPs. It's their own money. So therefore, sometimes they behave like individuals. They are able to support startups which are very out there kind of thing, like very risky, but they want it to happen. So sometimes they're able to do it. But if you look at the whole portfolio that they build, they will want to de-risk themselves as well. So therefore, sometimes they take that one-off bet which is outlandish, but otherwise they are very, yeah. You had a question. How does one become a LP?
Having lots of money.
Having lots of money. I don't know actually. To be to create a fund, you have to register with SEBI. It's called AIF, Alternate Investment Fund. So you have to register yourself. But to be LP, I don't know actually. Never thought of that question.
Net worth requirement. Net worth, like, you have some
I know, but
5 crores or something.
no, not 5 crores. Even if you want to be an angel investor, typically in India, recommendation is you must have a net worth of at least 100 crores. Because if you have 100 crores, then maybe you can put aside 10 crore to invest in this alternate investments. 10 crores, let's say you put 50 lakhs in every company, you'll have 20 companies. Out of that, it's the same logic. 3 will succeed, hopefully will give you the money back. Right? So that's the logic. So 10 crore is the minimum you should invest. To invest 10 crore, you must have at least 100 crore. So I think that is a separate class for for different people. I don't even know the math. I don't know the details of that. So, but all right. Okay. With this, let's get to the. This is the same picture. So I was lazy this time. So I won't ask you what this is. So let's go back and let's look at what we want to do now, right? So this is just to set the context, saying the market research and market size, what we discussed last time. When you look at the market size, you have to figure out that market should be at least $1 billion or more, right? Now, next 4 sessions will be around user model and value model, right? So those are the 2. This is the core of what the startup is all about. If you do that right, you will most likely get the business model right, and then we'll talk about the product market fit and other things, right? So, but let's look at the the most important part of doing the startup, right? And the first and foremost of that is, the 2 of them are user model and value models, right? So why do we need to think about it, right? And we need to think about it because if you go back and remember, the data says that 42% of startups fail because they build products which no one needs, right? And that implies there are 2 problems, right? First, those startups did not figure out the customers who wanted the products, right? Second, that the products they built were probably not delivering value to the customers, right? So it's a combination of 2. And we want to understand the first one, user model, now, and then we'll talk about the value model next time, right? And what we did last time, or actually one of the earlier sessions, was you look at users, in your market, whatever product that you want to build. You go to the market, you see thousands and millions of customers depending on what kind of products you're building, right? And therefore, typically what happens is you want to start segmenting them. You want to start breaking them into smaller chunks of customers so that you can understand them better, right? To do this, typically use various parameters or attributes or characteristics of those customers, right? Which could be the size of the, for B2B, it will be the size of the customer, how much money they have invested, how much, how many employees they have, and so on and so forth, right? So all of that, you look at that. And what happens with all of that is this concept called user personas. So if any of you, especially the ARTPARK, the Spark teams would know that, the personas are very, very important, well understood, I should say, concept, right? And everyone creates this. This is the example of a persona created by one of the companies that I very closely work with. It's a company called Flowcare, which was basically trying to build a product, an app, so that the nurses who go to people's home to do at-home services, they can plan their day better. Right? So and the product was targeted towards the US market. So they interviewed lots of customers in US market, and they figured out that typically you can see the bottom, this middle left, that age 43, what does that typical persona do? They are a nurse, married, mid, not the coastal towns, but the middle of US, that's where the need for this was more, and so on and so forth. So they did lots of work and they failed. Right? So this they spent 2.5 years and they did not succeed. So that's when I realized that all this thing that we ask our startups to do is actually a waste of time. Right? It's actually not useful because these kind of personas are useful when you actually already know what the need is and you're now building a good product for them. Problem with startups is you don't even know if there's a need. Right? You think there's a need, but after some time you figure out they actually don't want it. Right? So the problem is slightly different for early stage startups. If you already have a product, if you already have a company, you're building a new product, this is a great way to do it but not for the early stage startup. And that's where we talked about that what we should do really is to actually look at the users from an input and output point of view. What are they willing to put in and what are they expecting out of the system, right? That's all we need to look at. We don't need to look at who they are, what is their age, where do they live. All of that actually becomes extraneous information. It actually confuses everything. Right? So what do we need to do? We need to first and foremost understand that users are seeking value, right? Very simple. And value is nothing but what they put in into the system and what they get out of the system. Is that ratio is really what is working in their heads, right? And that in turn translates to what are the expectations from the system and what are the requirements into the system. How much they're willing to put in and what are they expecting out of the system, right? And we talked about this. Let me actually use an example for this, right? In fact, this is a recap. We talked about it, but let's look at it one more time so that we can go deeper into it, right? So we said that to actually understand the users in a more objective manner, so that you can take the biases out. Then actually, what is the bias? The bias typically, as a founder, you have is a conformity bias, or you have a positive outlook. So if anyone says something which very broadly corresponds to what you're thinking, you think, wow, this is perfect. These people have exactly the problem. These people have exactly the pain point that I thought they have. Let me build the product, right? So to get yourself away from that and to take a more objective view, we need quantitative parameters. The quantitative parameters for building products are typically inputs are effort, what they're willing to put in, which is including the money or the price that they're willing to pay for it, and output is what the benefits they want to derive from the product. Right? And if we look at consumer products, we looked at this. If you look at consumer products, the input into the system is proportional to the frequency of the activity. The higher the frequency of the activity, the higher is the repeated effort that the user has to put in. Therefore, higher is their demand for lower effort needed to do that activity. Right? That's how. If you're going to buy a house once in, let's say, 10, 15 years, you're more than happy to actually spend a month, 2 months going around, seeing the apartment, seeing the locations, localities, talking to people, spending hours to figure out, is this a good apartment or a house to buy or not. Right? Likewise for a car. But if you're going to buy milk or bread, right, you know what you want to buy, and you basically, let's say you have some constraint, you want to go to office or to college, then you want it to come to you fast. This is the reason why Instamart or a Zepto or Blinkit is actually scaling so fast, because they reduce the effort needed to order those things and get them to you. Right? So 5 years back, what would we do? We would actually call up the Kirana store and ask the person to deliver the same bread or milk. Now the variability, there was some variability in that activity, right? It might come in 2 minutes or 5 minutes, or it might take half an hour, depending on whether that person has a delivery person available or not, right? This is what these Zeptos of the world have eliminated, right? And roughly in the middle are the things which you do reasonably frequently, and they are also reasonably important. Therefore, you're willing to actually invest some time, but not too much time, right? So there's a gradation that happens. Very little effort and time here, and money also. You don't want to pay 2 rupees also to a Zepto, right? You want it basically free. You're happy to give 2% to a real estate agent, right? 2% of 2 crore, big number. You're happy to give, but here 2 rupees hurts you. So that's the kind of a correlation or the variation that we can see. For business products, those two parameters, frequency and importance, translate themselves slightly differently. And like we discussed, the input in this case becomes the money invested by the company, by your customer, not by you. You might take 3 years, 5 years and lots of money to build the product, doesn't matter. We have to look at what is the money the customer has invested in doing that activity. And what we discussed was, if you have an airlines business, right, or if you're building a product for airlines business, then it's better off to build products for pilots, because more money gets invested into them by airlines than on the ground staff, because less money gets invested into them. Right? So that's the correlation. So you want to look at the effort or the money invested by your customers into that activity. And on the output side is the proximity to revenue. Right? If you are building a product for electric vehicles, then it's better to build an electric vehicle itself, Tesla, rather than to build a battery which goes into an electric vehicle. Right? So there's a 10x reduction in monetization ability that you have every hop away from the revenue stream. So that's basically what it is. Right? So what we need to do when you start looking at the your customers is not to build those personas, but to basically understand this in more detail. Right? Make sense? Any questions? Okay.
There's a question
Yeah,
online
okay.
from Robin. Why is the venture capital funding timeline typically 10 months?
Why is the VC? See, because it takes that much time for a company to become large, for a startup to become large. So if you look at, like I said, Swiggy 2014 to 2024, you look at Flipkart, which started in 2008, and they got acquired by Walmart in 2017 or 2018. You look at Idea Forge, I think started in 2007, something time frame, and IPO'd in 21, or maybe I have the start date wrong, but it takes 10 or more years for a company, for an idea to become into a large viable business. So that's why. So if a startup is going to take that long, the VCs who are putting money into those startups are also going to take that long to take the money out. So that's why. Now there are different kinds of VCs. What I'm talking about are Series A, the investors who come in early, who put in the first round of money. Then there are some investors who come in late, who basically they're called Series B or C investors. Then there are private equity firms who only come in when the business is already there and the money is needed only to scale. Those guys have 3 to 5 year window. So I think it depends on what. When I say VCs, I'm talking about early stage investors who put in money early. Yeah. So, any other questions? All right. So if not, then let's look at one more example of these two, but look at them, from a point of view of a deep tech, right? So there are 3 kinds of robots. If you look at robotics world, typically they get broken down into 3 buckets. Right? First is the industrial robots. These are robots being used in manufacturing plants, in the chip making industry, and so on and so forth. That's the actually largest number of deployed robots are in this area. The second set of robots are medical robots, the robots that doctors use to do remote surgery, assisted surgery, right? Surprisingly, that's actually generating the most revenue, or maybe not surprisingly, but that's the one which, if you look at globally, that's the one which makes the most money, not the first one. The numbers are, the volume is the highest there, but the value is the highest in this one. And the third one, the top one is very, well known, well understood. These are the warehouse robots, right? You can run around. These ones are not as common. Actually, maybe, I don't know how many use Zumba. Okay, Zumba nahi, Roomba. Yeah. Okay. So those actually sell a lot. 20% of revenue globally is actually on the, those kind of robots. So the numbers are large, but the per device cost is much lower. The one in this middle is a stock taking robot. What it does is basically goes around in a department store, looks at the shelves, and essentially counts how many SKUs, how many units are on the shelves. So then the company can then back order to fill the things, right? So that's the actually I'll have to skip one slide and come there, but I'll just hold that thought. We'll come to that, but before that, slide misorder. But first, let's look at one example of Tejas. This is the reason I want to use this example is to reiterate that every hop away from the revenue stream, you have a 10x less value of the company, right? To do that, let's look at example of one of the earliest deep tech startups started out by IISc. Professor Shiv Ranjan was the CTO. Sanjay Nayak was the CEO, supported by Gururaj Deshpande, Sycamore, right, who were the first people to actually support it. So let's look at Tejas Ventures. And people know Tejas Networks? Anyone has heard of Tejas? Okay, at least 30-40%. Okay, got it. Okay, so Tejas is actually a company which builds products for networking, for telecom business, right? This is when the optical networks are coming in, there were not many switches which were optical switches. So these guys basically said, we can actually start building the optical switches, right? So then they made Ethernet products and so on and so forth. What they did very nicely was, besides having Sycamore as one of their supporters, they also got Nokia to co-create product for them, in the sense that Nokia said, if you build this product, I'll sell it for you. Right? So the specifications were jointly discussed. Right? Nokia said, yes, if these products get built, you actually build these products as per these specs, we will use our sales and distribution channel to sell globally. Right? So that's basically how it happened. Over 2005-6, I think they raised $35 million, and they didn't raise more money after that. They became profitable. In 2016, they had 117 million revenue, and they then, roughly 22, they got Tata's acquired around 52% equity share, majority stake in the company. Right? The valuation, which I checked recently, is around $2 billion. Right? So if you look at this, this is where they go. This is the bottom of the stack. Top of the stack is companies like the operators, right? And Airtel, which is actually in India, that's valued at $110 billion. Nokia is, and you can see where these different companies are. Tejas is 12% of the market, so it's actually in the top 5 globally. It's actually one of the best, hardware, networking hardware companies. Huawei is 29%, Ericsson 23%, and then come these two. Right? So Tejas is actually up there, and the value is $2 billion. Airtel in India, one not very high ARPU, average revenue per user country, is valued at 110 billion. If you look at globally, all the companies put together, the market size is much bigger. Ericsson, which is the largest company, is valued at 25 billion. Right? So you can see that there's a 10x multiplier from here to here, right? And there's a more than 10x multiple from there if you put all the telecom companies together, from Ericsson's of the world to the telecoms of the world. Right? The reason is that as end user, when we use Airtel or Jio, we are paying to them. They then look at saying, okay, to run this network, I need to have this infrastructure. They will contact Ericsson's or Nokia's of the world and ask them to deploy it. Right? So that's where they will pay money to these, and these guys will pay money to these. Right? So every hop away reduces the value of the market by 10x. Right? So if possible, if you're thinking of doing a startup, if possible, go up the value stream. Don't be that I'll supply the parts, I'll have the best IP, no one can build products like that. Of course, you will be large company. A $2 billion company is actually a good company, very good company. But if you can be 10x bigger if you start bundling them together and start providing full networks to operators, and you'll be 10x more if you go to and become the end consumer facing company. Right? So that's the kind of multiples you see. Right? Okay, now let's come back to the robots and the those. The robotic industry actually got started back in 1961 when General Motors first deployed their a robotic like a fixed arm robot for welding. Right? So that's basically what was the first use of robots in industry. If you are to place them on this matrix, I'll give you an anchor. It will go somewhere here, right? Right? Because it has to be placed somewhere. I'll place it here. The next, I'll ask for your help, right, to place. After this, the next set of robots came in manufacturing and heavy industry, specifically in the aeronautical industry, aerospace industry. Right? So Boeing's and the defense companies, which needed high precision manufacturing, they needed robots, right? And in both of these cases, it is not cost cutting. They're not trying to reduce. They're not trying to eliminate humans. They're saying that I need more precision, and humans cannot give me the precision that I need. Therefore, I need a robotic arm, right? Now, if so, where would you place this particular, let's say, high precision manufacturing? Sorry, right high is your vote. Your vote. Bottom right is your vote. Anyone else? 2 boxes taken. There are 4 more remaining. Third column, second row here. Okay, all 3 on the right gone. It's like bingo, right? वो क्या बोलते हैं? Housey. All right. So let's stop there. Why bottom right?
Because high precision won't give direct ROI. That's what
High precision won't get direct ROI.
Nice to have, it's not must have.
No. I think high precision is needed because otherwise you will not get the. See, actually, let's go back to automotive industry. Why did they start using robots for welding? Because if the welds are correct, then after 5 years the car will creak less. You will have less issues with the car, right? So in high precision manufacturing, by definition, it should be high precision, right? And it's almost a requirement. So it's not. It's likely not here. There is some correlation, right? Top right, yeah.
So it's as a defense and airplanes require very high precision.
Yeah.
Life and death. So definitely they expect very high output.
Yeah.
And to give that high output, it's very tough in robotics to have that level of precision. So
Okay.
that's where-
But why? No, that's understood. But why not here? I think there was a middle guy here. Yeah. And why here? So let me ask him why middle?
Sir, I feel it is not directly correlated to the return on investment.
Okay.
You can
So
get
directly correlated तो यहाँ आएगा ना?
not directly.
Not directly. Okay. Indirectly.
It is.
Okay.
It's not the motor.
Okay, I would put it right in between the two. let's not debate. Okay, so it's somewhere here going towards here because I think both of you are right. It is almost necessary, right? But can you say, am I making more money because of this or no? Not yet clear. Maybe very good operator can also do it, right? But it is more important than than a car guy. Next one. Next two actually. Electronics and semiconductors and pharma. Right? Now the reason these industries started using robots was actually they needed a clean room environment. They cannot live with contamination. Right? So it becomes like critically important, right? If you don't have something like this, right? Therefore, where should this go? Top right, right? I think it's clear. So it goes there, and then so on and so forth. So let me not, ask. Logistics warehouse comes on the bottom left. You can debate a little bit. Robotic surgery, healthcare. This goes on the up, and so on and so forth, right? You will have differences of opinion. That's perfectly fine. We don't have to agree because only when you have differences of opinion, then your perspective will be the right perspective. Perhaps 5 years later, you'll find out that you were right and everyone else was wrong, right? So you should have different opinion and you should be able to defend your opinion. And for a long time, no one will believe you. That's also fine. You should be able to stay with your opinion. But the opinion should be grounded in something. And should it be grounded in is what we have talked about. Those are the two things, the inputs and outputs. Right? The grounding should be quantitative, grounding should be objective. It should not be, this is what I think, right? Because you can think today one thing and it might change depending on who you talk to. So if you anchor it on something more objective, then likely you will get it right? So that's what basically user research is all about. That's what you need to do when you talk to customers. Now, this is what I would think that Spark teams will be more likely to do than the ISC teams, right? So, because I think Spark teams, ARTPARK teams are already building products and they're already going to the market, right? So they would likely do this. So maybe I'll have a separate session with them about this. But let's look at this. So the two questions we have to ask when we do user research. First is input requirement changing, right? Because only when there's a change that happens, that's when an opportunity to do something new comes out, right? The other one is the output expectation changing, right? Now, question really is, which of them is actually changing, right? And which one is better for you in some sense, right? So first is from an input side, if you're building a product which is consumer centric, which you want to sell to consumers, right? Then what you want to look at is what is the frequency of the activity that the users do, and is there a reason that the frequency might change, right? And I have examples, so I'll go to the examples next, but let me just define them first. On the business side, if you're building a business product, the question you have to ask yourself is, how much money have the customers, your target customers, invested in doing that activity? And is the money invested likely to increase or decrease? It can be decreasing also, but you have to understand, is it going to change, right? And on the output side, you have to ask yourself, is the importance going to increase? That's for consumer products, right? And on the business side, you have to ask, is the revenue proximity going to change? Is there going to some change going to happen in the revenue proximity, right? Can you guys visualize examples of this? Let me ask one question. Consumer products easier because everyone will get them, but so I'll ask question on consumer product. This one, output expectation change for consumer product. Can you, over the last, let's say 5 years, 3 years, can you think of a category in which the expectations change dramatically? Internet speeds, that's more gradual. I think you get used to 2 Mbps, then you want 20, and then you get 20, you want 200. So that's more gradual. Sorry? Quick commerce, exactly, right? So your expectation, how long will it take for the product to come to you after you place an order, has dramatically changed, right? So that has, now it is difficult to visualize this. Actually, rest of the world is still living in that world, which is they can't get products in 30 minutes. But in India now, we can't imagine living without that. So that's where a dramatic change happens, and that's what you need to be looking out for, right? So let me give you a few more examples where these things have happened over the last 5 years or 7 years, right? So if you look at consumer, the payments is one of the things which has, I think has dramatically changed. The landscape has changed, right? And because of that, if you see Indian startup ecosystem, there's lots of startups in that area, right? Look at one more. This is the little older, but the cloud-based applications. Once we all got used to cloud-based applications as consumers, when we go to office, for example, this TV's user experience is actually quite bad, right? You expect it to work more naturally, but now, earlier what used to happen was when you buy a software product, let's say Oracle, where I worked for 8 years, you buy Oracle, someone from Oracle will come to your company and train you for 2 weeks or a month. So it was, and you would pay for that also, right? So you buy the product and then you pay to get trained to use that product. That was a standard. It was not even that Oracle was, obnoxious. Every company was doing that. But now if you tell people that I'll send someone and you'll have to pay for training, it's not going to work, right? So I think our expectations have dramatically changed, right? This is an input. How much we want to invest into it. It's not the money. It's how much 2 weeks or 2 months of learning is not an acceptable solution now, right? Consumer apps on smartphones, it's also something that has changed. Let's look at this, outputs. So what happens is actually inputs don't change that frequently. Outputs change more frequently, right? What your expectation for the product actually dramatically changes, because inputs are what you're going to invest into it. How much money I'm going to pay, how much effort I'm going to put in. Outputs change more dramatically, more quickly, right? Here's an example of this actually example of during COVID, what happened was, we all went through it. Suddenly the health became most important, and, everyone was disinfecting everything. It was a joke. But because of that, what happened was companies which understood that were able to grow much faster. A case in point is a company that I worked very closely with is called Urban Company. So Urban Company, what it did was, it actually said every service provider will have Arogya Setu app. And Arogya Setu app would give you, if anyone who got infected, multiple hops away, it will tell you. And Urban Company said, if any service provider got exposed to a COVID patient or one hop away COVID patient, that person, service partner, will get full money, but they should not go to work, or they prevented them from going to work. So they would monitor the Arogya Setu app and they would pay the full money, but they would say, you will not go. Because of that, customers understood that this is a safer product. Therefore, instead of calling your local neighborhood, let's say plumber or electrician, people started calling Urban Company. And they saw a significant spike during COVID of the utilization. Right. Another example of this is education. EdTech, we now facing the crash, but Byju's, Vedantu, Unacademy, all of them grew significantly because parents got used to working from home. And once they saw, actually we can do productive work sitting at home on a laptop, then they said, okay, maybe our kids can also learn better. And that's where normally when you go to your coaching classes, you spend an hour going and coming. So that time got saved, and instead you get invest in learning better, right? So So these changes happen more frequently, and that's what, when you do user research, is what you need to look for, right?
But sir, right now it's completely reversed, both in workplace as well and education as well.
Okay, which, in what sense? The edtech example.
EdTech example.
Yes.
So like work from home,
Yeah.
now reversing both in industry also and education.
It's not reversing completely. It is going back to the middle. What has happened was, earlier you could not do a meeting if everyone was not in the same room. Now now companies are saying that for meetings, come to for 2 days in a week, come to office, 3 days in a week work from home, because you can actually work productively from home. So what has happened is the pendulum swung all the way, saying everyone should be remote and you can get good work. Earlier it was everyone should be at office, and you cannot think about working from home. Then it went this side. Now we are coming roughly to the middle, saying rough equilibrium is where we are looking, and it will be different for different companies. So there'll be some companies which will say, no, you have to come every day. And typically early stage startups want everyone to be around, because more ideas get discussed and it becomes easier and faster to grow or to innovate. But more steady state companies typically have this, some roughly in the middle kind of thing.
But in EdTech, it's completely now very few percent prefer.
That's not true. That's not true. The edtech growth has stalled, but edtech utilization has not gone down. It is not that people who, in tier 2 cities or tier 3 cities, or actually even in Bangalore, but, who don't have access to good teachers, they are not saying, I'll go and do offline class with a bad teacher. They are still balancing between a good teacher online versus a not so good teacher offline, and they're trying to balance it. The reason we are seeing the downturn, or so to say, issues with Byju's and others or an academy also, is because they anticipated a much larger population to start adopting their solution. So they projected that they will be able to get more customers and get more money from those customers. The same three numbers, right? Number of users, number of bundling activities, revenue per activity. So they thought they will get more users. They thought they will get more. They thought these students will use more of their courses, and they thought they could charge them more. Right? 2 out of those 3, are not panning out that they thought it would be. But others are doing well. Physics wala is doing well, Vedantu is doing well. So I don't think we are reversing. I think it was a bad business judgment, and I think that's fine. In startups that happens. So no issues with thinking the market will become very large, but it doesn't become that large. Right? So
Can you discuss a little bit on this? I have few inputs too.
sorry.
Can we discuss a little bit on this?
हाँ बोलो ना. If it helps, one more.
One
Then
question online.
one second. Let's finish that, or is it related to this?
End consumer, yes.
Okay, let's finish. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So sir, before coming here, I
Uh-huh.
had lot of gap in education. So obviously I had to prepare for GATE.
Okay.
So I joined an academy.
Okay.
And it was useful for me.
Okay.
It drastically increased my rank in GATE and all.
Okay.
Quality of the videos were good,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, I could not finish my syllabus. I hardly had a 30 to 40% of syllabus I could complete.
Okay.
And the kind of push was not there. It was simply I had to watch the videos, get
Yeah.
and get the output.
Yeah.
So this is the case of an academy which is considered.
Now you have to ask yourself, why does an academy do that, right? So you have to go back to, see, it's very important to go back to how they started. So if we go back to the real start of an academy, is an academy started to say, we will help the professionals prepare better for government entrance exams. So whether it's a banking exam or one of those. Now, because of that, they assume that the people who are doing it are self-motivated and they are working, therefore they won't have time to attend classes. So that's why the model that they had was, I'll have videos and I will let students go look at the videos, and therefore that'll be enough. If you look at on the other side of the spectrum, Vedantu started by saying, I will want to go after the students. And therefore from day one, they said, you will need to have so to say, a mentor who gets in touch with the students and asks them, are you progressing? If not, this is what you should be doing, right? So the mentor gives a schedule. So I think Unacademy started like that. And if you look at Byju's started by helping people to prepare for CAT and GMAT, those kind of exams, right? Which is what Byju Ravindran's, skill was, right? So therefore, they have something in between. So I think that's where the DNA of the company is. So you're right. If to really do better in preparation, you need to have a peer group, and you need to have someone who pushes you to do better, which is what now everyone's trying to, so to say, reverse engineer into the system. But people who started like that, Vedantu, already have that. From day zero, they had that. So that's maybe where your experience comes from.
So my question is related to physics wala. Now physics wala is creating a lot of hype.
Uh-huh.
So
Last
are they
question,
living up
okay.
to that hype?
Huh.
Next question is,
Huh.
and you are saying they are still
They're growing.
still doing good.
Yes.
I want to understand what different they are doing and still.
No, physics wala is a different story. Physics wala is the. Huh. How do I know? Because they raised money recently. So if they raise money recently.
This information is it public?
No, the raise money. I'm only talking about public information. Nothing in this class will be from my proprietary information. Yeah, I will not divulge. It's all public information. So I'm basing it on the fact that they raised, reasonable amount of money at $1 billion plus valuation recently. So the reason they're doing good is actually because they realize that lots and lots of students in India are not comfortable with English, and regional languages are what they need or they get comfortable with. So they have actually built a product which caters to that. So that's why physics wala is actually growing, because students who are not that comfortable in English still are good academically in technical stuff. So they need that kind of support. Right? So, all right, online questions.
So there are two questions.
Okay.
One is related to VC. So we just skipped that because we covered that topic.
हो गया क्या? Otherwise we can answer that question. I'm happy to answer.
One is, what percent of startups in India get VC funding? Are deep tech startups even good fit for VCs at early stage?
What percent of startups get VC funding? That's a tough question. I don't have a good answer to that. I can tell you, Axel talks to around, let's say, 500 startups in a year, and funds roughly 25 of them. So 1 in 20 is what Axel funds. That does not mean that only 5% of startups get funding, but that's the data I have. I don't know India-wise numbers. So.
One more question is related to customers. As we move away from end consumer, there's a 10x drop in the revenue of the company.
Yeah.
Can you kindly explain the math?
Explain the math. Okay. Let's go back and visually see it but math is not related to what I'm going to show. कहाँ गया वो? Tejas Networks, na? Where is Tejas? Here. All right. So the math, the question is, why is Tejas making 2 billion while Ericsson making 25 billion? Actually, that's a valuation of the company, but you can take divided by 10 as the revenue. As you can see, revenue of Tejas is 117 in 2016, and I think they have done very well. So their revenue must be around 200 million or so, is my guess. I don't know. Someone can actually check right now. They are a public company. So there's a 2 billion valuation, 200 million revenue, let's say 25 here, and 100, 200 or so more there. Why is that? I think it is basically a simple cost side analysis that companies do. So let's say you're a company which is building a product. One of the inputs into one of the components of the product cannot be more than 10%. So that's typically the thing, because you're going to put together something. End of the day, you want to have 50% profit margin, gross margin, right? So therefore, all the things put together into the system cannot be 1/10 of the total cost, right? And likewise here, if Ericsson is going to buy all these switches from someone to make a infrastructure for telecom, they cannot afford more than 10 or max 20% of that as the input cost. So it's basically that math. It's the input that goes into the system. All right, so let's go. All right, and the last question here is, last point here is that in businesses, lots of time companies, let me complete, look at whether they can get rid of intermediaries. And if so, then what it does, it gets them closer to the revenue, right? And this is why we saw over the last few years, D2C brand, direct to consumer brand, became big, because every brand thought if we don't have to give 30% to Amazon, then I will take 30%, and therefore my margins will go up. So that's where I think that whole wave of D2C brands came into India, globally also actually it came. So that's the reason why. I mean, that's what we as a startup founders, as a startup early people, you have to think about these kind of things, right? Where is the market changing? You had a question?
So, even the previous questions about physics wire,
Uh-huh.
why they are doing well. So, they found some areas and they differentiate themselves from others.
Yes.
But with time, the others will find out that what are the areas that they are working on.
Correct.
And they are doing. So,
Correct.
So, how can you defend against the strategy of others?
Yeah, that's always a challenge, no? So once as a startup, you come up with a great idea, and you start building it. In the beginning, no one believes that will give you enough differentiation, so they think let them do it. It's not a big deal. But let's say 3-5 years go down, and then physics wala becomes physics wala, and then everyone is waking up saying, okay, actually local language content and education is important. So what it does is it gives them a 3 to 5 year headway. It's give them a lead to maintain. Of course, everyone will now try to say, okay, if this is working, Vedantu will say I should also do it, right? Now, therefore, there will be a competition, right? And which is why there's, if you look at any industry, all businesses have what's called an S curve. You start slow because you're still proving to yourself and to the world that you can deliver value. Then there's a steep growth, right? Which is when everyone is adopting it. And then there's a small, the growth slows down again, because that's the time when the competitors catch up, right? And when they catch up, then your growth goes down. So every business has this S curve. You start slow, grow fast, then mature, markets mature, and then you grow slow again. So the only answer or solution to that is innovation. So you have to come up with a next great idea, right? What would be the next great idea in education, right? I can answer it from Vedantu's point of view. I don't know about physics wala, but Vedantu says that the next big great idea is that we need to cut down the cost of education. Number one. Number two, cost is never a good differentiator. More importantly, we need to make education a different, personalized experience, right? So that's what they do. How do you personalize it for n equal to 1 for every individual student? Is by using AI. Right? So they're building these agents which can become your tutor or your teacher and tell you exactly how you are going to learn. So for everyone in this room, you'll get a slightly different experience if you go to Vedantu. Right? And at the much lower cost, because the incremental cost of delivering now content is 0. Right? So as opposed to paying 30% to the tutor who is actually teaching physically. Right? So whether that will help or not, we don't know. But yeah, as startups, as companies, you have to keep thinking of new ways to keep building better and better products.
So, but to add to it, the only main motivation for education
Yeah.
is competitiveness.
No, that's not true.
As far as I
No, that's not true. Big driver.
Which is scalable.
Yeah, globally, no, you look at, so education, okay, I should be repeating the question as per the one last. Okay, the question is, in education, the only large revenue generator are competitive exams, right? So I think that's a correct statement mostly, but not entirely, because if you look at White Hat Junior, which was acquired by Byju's for $300 million in 3 years, I think they became. What was White Hat Junior doing? It was helping students learn programming. It was not related to competitive exams. So, and if you look at other companies like Upgrad, which are doing well, that's all about skilling, reskilling, upskilling. So I think there's a lot of, there's a big area which is competitive exam, but there are a lot of areas around it which are also in India are now large enough businesses, and globally also. If you look at only India, around 250,000, 2.5 lakh students go abroad for undergrads, right? All of them actually do some kind of preparation to go out. So including for SAT, SATs. So that could be another area. And so I think there are many areas. It is the creativity of the founder to come up with that. Then go back and say, is the expectation changing? Is the market changing somehow? Then go start building product for that. How to build and what to build, we'll talk next session. And how to validate, most importantly, we'll talk in the next few. But I think there are many possibilities. But if the possibility does not exist, then you should not do it. If the market size is not large, then no matter how good your team is, no matter how good your ideas are, you will not succeed. As we saw that's what law of markets. A great market, a great team is needed to succeed. If the market is not good, no matter how much struggle you put in, you will not succeed. All right, this is what it is. Okay, one more question. Till that time, you can enjoy this nice. Okay, you don't enjoy this. Okay.
To be in the game, we have to innovate ourselves all the time.
Yes.
But if we try to innovate ourselves, then there will be some disruptions in
Okay.
that logistics or supply chain.
Sure.
So how to balance that?
How to balance that? This is what 15 years back, this Harvard guy came up with, Clayton Christensen, which is called disruptive innovation theory. Exactly why large companies do not innovate, because what happens is if you innovate too much, then your current whatever the value streams or the revenue streams that you have, they can get disrupted. So, for example, popularly it's known that Kodak came up with digital cameras long ago, right? But Kodak was selling the films and the cameras. So they said, it's a great idea. Please, think of something else. This is not going to help us make money. Therefore, we are not going to do it, right? This is what is called disruptive innovation theory. So large companies do not innovate because they are worried about their revenue streams will get disrupted, which is what startups are able to, say they have nothing to lose. They can, they can actually innovate. So, which is why I think we are all here, because those opportunities keep coming up. It's a good thing, actually. Yeah. How to avoid it? As if you become large, that's a separate question. You can look at my book. I actually talk about that. So, anything else? No. All right. So enjoy this for a minute. You know where this is? Huh? NASA, yes, of course. You said NASA. I said, oh my God. Yeah, you had a question? No, it was just this. Okay. All right. So this last bit of this, is how do you do it? How do you do this user model definition, right? Which is what long ago, I think, which some of you will resonate with this, and I think most of techies do. I used to think like this also, that if you build a great product, obviously it will succeed. There's no doubt about it, right? People will figure it out and they'll come and they'll buy it from you. But that's not how the world works, right? So what do you have to do? You have to actually, go and talk to your customers, right? And this is why this guy, Steve Blank, became so popular, well known, who basically was the first one to actually articulate it in a very systematic way. How should you go about doing it? He called it customer development. Because earlier, the only thing people would do is what's called product development. You build a product, you're done. As a startup guy, you're done. Steve Blank said, no, you're not done. More important is customer development. You have to figure out to whom are you going to sell, right? So that's basically what Steve Blank said. And this is what typically you want to do. You want to actually figure out, in your mind, you'll have some idea who your potential customers are. That's the first drawing. Then you will start talking to people. Then you'll get a slightly better idea. But really, when you get out and start talking to real customers, then you'll get a picture that, possibly these are the kind of people who want my product. And then, when you start selling it, that's when you get the real customer, then it becomes deeper. And that's what actually also helps you to innovate better compared to someone else. If you're already in the business, you already know many issues challenges that your customers are facing, which others will not know, right? Which is why the companies which are already in the field are able to innovate better. I wanted to put this up only to say that if you go today and search it online on Bing or Google, and you enter user research, you will see tons of material, and you will see something like this. There is all kinds of things which are called user research, from down in the middle, user testing, user research, design research, applied research. Everything is called user research, broadly speaking. But we don't want to do any of that except these two. The only two things that are important for us are interviews, and more important than interviews are observation. Because when you ask people, they sometimes don't tell you the truth, right? So actually observing them doing things is what you need to do, which is what the ISC teams will not do it, because that requires lots of effort. But I would want the ARTPARK Spark teams to do that. Right? So what happens when you do user research? What happens when you do user interviews? You basically want to talk to them on a one-on-one basis, right? So first and foremost is to get this deep connect with them. Not deep connect, but they need to trust you. They need to trust you enough to start telling you about what real problems they're facing. To get those the answers, it should be an open-ended question. It should not be, oh, I built this app, what do you think? Right? The minute you ask that question, I built this app, what do you think? It is not about what problems are they facing. They're now going to critique your app. Or I built this product, what do you think? Right? They're going to say, let me put my analytical hat and let me tell them 3 things which can be improved here. It is then no longer about this was my problem or not my problem. It is only about, have you done a good thing or good job or not, right? Therefore, you don't want to do that. You want to ask open-ended questions, and I'll tell you how to do that. Next is field observations. Like I said, instead of asking questions, it's even better if you can actually start observing them. Let's say if you're building a new robot, actually go to the factory or wherever the robot will be deployed. Actually observe what do they do, right? They obviously don't have a robot right now, right? But they're doing some activity which you want to now automate. You observe them, what is the process? How do they do that? And in your mind, you will be visualizing, can I replace all of these with the robot that I'm building, right? So that's basically what you want to do. This is, if you can't go physically, then you can at least go online and observe where people talk about issues, right? Which is where the Reddit and other places are very, very useful to go. Right? And FGDs, focus group discussions are actually useful, but not recommended. So don't do it unless it's very, very difficult to get people together. And sometimes FGDs are focus group discussions are useful because when one customer talks about it, the others open up and they start talking more about it. So what you can do is plant a few friendly, people who mention a few problems so that everyone else then opens up and starts sharing their issues. Right? So what we don't want to do is this thing which, again, the very well known, very, very widely used, which is jobs to be done. Right? People know about jobs to be done. Anyone has heard about this concept called jobs to be done? No? Okay. So I'll tell you the way it was explained by, again, this is the same guy, Clayton Christensen. The way he describes is to say that, assume a product, right? And he talks about one example, very, very well known, is milkshakes, right? So basically, I think his group was hired by McDonald's to see how they can sell more milkshakes, right? And what they found was that what McDonald's did was to try to say, can I make more types of milkshakes, let's say with more flavors, or can I bundle something else with it? Can I sell, let's say, a donut with it? Right? So they tried everything, nothing worked. Right? Eventually, what Clayton's group found was that a milkshake is, so to say, hired to do some work. What does the work milkshake do is the question then. They found that in almost 50% of sale of milkshake happens in US, this is all US, in mornings, between 6 a.m. and like 9 a.m. Right? Then the question is, why are so many people buying milkshake in the morning? And when they started interviewing the people, they found that most of them were actually coming in and buying milkshake and going out, not ordering anything else. And when they asked them, they found that all of them had a long commute, let's say 30-minute or longer commute. And they wanted a milkshake to be sitting in their, that cup holder. And they wanted the milkshake to be very, very thick so that it doesn't get done soon. So that through that straw, if you have to suck that, it takes some effort and it takes 5, 10, 15 minutes to finish that, right? Which is, in a way, they were using it not as a breakfast, but as a way to avoid getting bored. So they were just getting sugar spike and drinking this. So that's what they figured, and that's how they started figuring out how can they actually increase the sale of the milkshakes. Right? The reason, it is a great story. It is very insightful story. The reason I don't want you to do this at all is because this is useful when you're improving a product. They already were selling milkshakes, they wanted to figure out how to improve it. That's when understanding what is the main job to be done, what is the related jobs to be done, what is the functional aspect of the job, what is the emotional aspect of the job is useful. When we don't even know who our customers are, all of these are Hawame questions. Right? You will spend years or months figuring it out. People have gone crazy about these jobs to be done. There's all kinds of things. Do not read any of that. Just skip it completely. Just simply look at the objective criteria of doing the user research. Right? Then the last question is, okay, so how do you do it? How should you do it? This is thing which is a lady called Teresa Torres. She's talked about it. This is called ladder of evidence. What you really want to do is to first ask, there's a 5 steps in this ladder, and you have to basically climb the ladder, so to say. Right? So example is, let's say you ask someone, do you do exercise? Right? A typical answer would be yes, I do exercise. Right? Then so that's this. Right? So it could be asked other way. What do you do for exercise? Let's say someone says, let's say I play badminton or I do yoga. Right? So that's what they are. Right? The next step would be to ask, okay, great that you do yoga, or right. When was the last time that you did it? Right? So that's your next question. Now, by asking that question, if the person responds in a very not firm, but very clear way that they actually did yoga and they're able to relate to it, then you know that actually they're doing yoga, not just they want to do yoga. Right? Then you ask another question about, okay, let's say they say, yes, I do yoga, and last time I did it was 2 weeks back, but I missed, last week. Then you ask the next question, okay, why did you miss it last week, right? Then they'll say, oh, I was at work, and then I wanted to get to the yoga place, but, blah, 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 some traffic, this, that. That's the next thing, right? Then you ask them this question, but, why did you go? If you miss one, then why do you go? Then they say, oh, actually I go because 3 of us go together, and, so on. So you're basically getting more and more data about it. And you're also, when they, let's say that, oh, I go with my friends, then you also understand that yoga is not just an exercise, but it's also a social thing, right? So therefore, if you want to replace it, let's say you want to build a cult, then you want to actually say, I need to have group classes, because group classes is what pulls people in. Even if they miss 1 or 2, it's a group classes which is actually pulling them back in. That's the insight you want to derive. So you don't want to just ask them, do you do this or not? I want to ask them about stories. Then you want to ask them about, this is where you start saying, okay, I'm thinking of doing a group classes. Would you be interested in Zumba? Or rather, you would ask it differently. You would never ask, would you be interested? Because you ask, okay, besides yoga, what else do you do? Then they might say, oh, once in a while play badminton, once I play do Zumba and so on and so forth. Then you say, okay, great. It's at least there's some, understanding of something else, and so on and so forth. Right? So that's how you want to climb this ladder. That's how the user research needs to be done. Right? All right, so this is the visuals of the same thing that I just mentioned. And I'll skip this. I'll go straight to one example of a use or a case study where people did it badly. But here's what you should do, and then I'll tell you how it is so difficult to do correctly. Right? So this is what you should not do, is not ask leading questions. Right? So you should not be asking any of the questions on the left side. So, that's where, because the minute you ask the question in a way which reveals your bias, people are very sensitive. They don't want to disappoint you. They will give you answer that you think you want. And a very well-known story, or maybe not well-known story about this, is Whirlpool. When they launched their washing machines in India, they were selling in the tier 1 cities, but they're not able to sell in the tier 2 and more cities. And what they would do is they would go to these smaller towns, and they would then set up a stall, and they will give them samosa, whatever, chai, right, which is what gets everyone, And then they would ask the question saying, washing machine aapne kharida tha, what happened, why don't you use it, right? They would actually give these, customers would give them great answers, which they would feel that everything is right. But they would not tell, oh, it takes too much water, we don't get water supply, or whatever else issues might be. And the reason is that they felt, and when they realized that this was happening, the third party went and asked them saying, "Aapne sahi answer kyun nahi diya? Why didn't you say the right thing?" And he said, "Itni dur se aaye hain, Bombay se aaye hain, how can we disappoint them?" Right? So So that's how people are sensitive to what you ask them. So you don't want to be on the leading side, you want to be on the neutral side, right? You want to also not say that I'm building this product, because the minute you say that, you have biased them. You want to say, I'm a student, I'm doing a research. So now tell me. So you have no stake in the ground. Tell me the real story. That's how you want to get to on the right hand side. Right? So let's look at the example where someone, did user research, a lot of user research, but failed. Right? It's a company called Munchery in US, which was actually building. Anyone has heard of Munchery? No one has heard of Munchery. Okay. So Munchery was basically saying that once the Zomatos and the Swiggies of the world became big in US, then came the next set of people saying, okay, everyone's eating these, normal food. What about exotic food? What about, chef prepared food, right? Which is what Munchery said. Let's do really good experiences, right? Then people will pay more, right? That's what they did. They started in 2010 and they raised $125 million. They were valued at $300 million at one time, right? And what they did was to just like Vedanta did, when they were going, saying, we will get the best teachers in India to teach on our platform. Manjri said, we'll get the best chefs and, help, cook for us. And in fact, the chefs can also go to your house and cook if you want them, right? So it didn't work, but they pivoted many times. So first they did ready to eat good food, which is meal kit. First actually ready to eat meal, then the meal kit, and then finally subscription plan. Right? This, if you see, is recurring revenue, once in a while revenue. Right? So this is more of a attempt to survive. But the question is, why did they fail? Right? And the reason is they ask questions like this. In their user research, they have documented themselves. So it's not like I'm saying this. This is what someone has done a case study on this. So they would do, when they would do user research, they would ask, would you want last minute order changes and more choices? Right? Why would a customer say no to that? Right? Obviously, I want more. If you can do it, give it to me. Right? So because of that, they asked questions like this. And because of that, what they did was they actually started using that. Because this is well ingrained in everyone, saying you should build what customers want. Right? So if customers want, say they want more choices and they want to change things in the last minute, let's make sure they do it. So what they did was they basically started making many, many different types of dishes, many different options. You could add, like if you go to Domino's, the only choice really you have is what toppings you want. You do not, of course now you have a base choice also, but what cheese to put in, they don't give you a choice, right? Whether you want this type of cheese, that type of cheese, or 4 cheeses, they don't give you that option. So they have limited your choices. But these guys actually went ahead and said, no, we are gourmet food, therefore we must give choices for everything. And what happened was, because of that, the menu became bigger and bigger. Their logistics became tougher and tougher, and the value that they would then deliver to customer became lower. Right? So that's what happens for them. Instead, what should be done would have been open-ended questions. So if, for example, they got a quote like this, I love your food because it saves me cooking time myself. From there, you have to derive that people are using my product only because they don't want to cook themselves. But if you get quotes like this, I order your food whenever I invite my friends who really enjoy food, then you know that your food is well regarded. Right? So these are the kind of questions one needs to ask rather than, the one mentioned on the top. Right? That's it, and I'll finish with this last thing. So what you need to do when you do user research is to basically ask questions, but you have to ask questions by removing your own biases. So put aside the product you're building, put aside whatever you thought about, figure out who your customers are, and go talk to them with an open mind. Right? That's what is the right way of doing user research.
So there's a question online.
Okay.
Why didn't another Munchery or competitor come up by rectifying this error, given it's a big market?
That's a good question, actually. Why didn't they come up? I don't have an answer to that. Yeah, Swiggy has gourmet options. Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, I'll apply the same activity framework, matrix framework to that. So the question to ask ourselves is, what is the frequency of ordering this gourmet food? right? So there's a so this is a consumer product, so you have to use frequency and importance as the two, right? So on x-axis you have frequency of ordering and y-axis importance of ordering. Now if the frequency of ordering is, let's say, once in a month, because I want gourmet food only once in a month, then typically it is difficult to build a recurring business. I mean, if you go here, they had a monthly subscription plan. The reason they had a monthly subscription plan was they wanted recurring money to come to them. For recurring money to come to them, the activity should be at least twice or thrice in a month, because otherwise if it's once a month, well, you can have a monthly plan also with once a month, but one is frequency of the that food ordering. Second is the importance. How much delta are you willing to pay vis-a-vis, let's say, the best pizza place, let's say Brick Oven, right? So vis-a-vis Brick Oven, are you willing to pay more or not will become the question. So delta on that, importance and frequency, those are two parameters. So I think we have talked about the lenses we want to use. Maybe we need to apply them carefully and see the answer. I don't know the answer. Two more questions. Okay. Anyone else questions? Please ask. Okay. One second. Either then next you have.
Generally, our first investors are friends and family. You need some number valuation at early stage to raise funds from them. What would that number be? Mean value from startup valuation at that stage.
Okay, so the question is, if you're going to raise the first round of money from friends and family, then what should be the valuation of how should the valuation of the company be set?
Considering they'll raise VC rounds later.
Assuming they'll raise VC round later. So normally, this was a big issue for a long time till a concept of safe notes came. So what happens nowadays is that when you raise from friends and family, when you raise seed round, which is small amount of money, then actually you don't set value of the company. What you tell them is, when I raise VC money, when I raise institutional money, I'll give you 10, 20, 30% discount on that. Right? So if you give me money today, let's say 100 rupees, and I eventually raise, let's say 1,000 rupees at 10,000 valuation, then I will take your 100 rupees, discount the value of my company 10,000 by 30%, so that's become 7,000. So the 100 divided by 7,000 is the equity, I'll give it to you. So you're giving them benefit of investing early by giving them more discount. So that's how you don't set price till it comes to a point where someone is willing to set the price. So you had one question, then we'll ask. There was one more question, but yeah, go ahead.
No, in models where the customer and the user are different, like the one that's buying from you and the one that's using is different.
Yes.
How do you go ahead? What's the context?
Good question. Got it. So when the user persona and the buyer persona, person who's buying and person who's paying is different, then how should the user research be done, right? I think we can go back to education because that's a classic example, right? So the user of that product, user persona, is a student, but the one who's paying for that is parent, right? So what you have to do is actually you have to talk to both, right? Because the pain point will be more well articulated by the student, but the willingness to pay and ability to pay will be only articulated by the parent. So you have to actually talk to both of them. And in fact, this, if you go back and see some of the Byju's early ads, I think you will see that they were always talking to both. The ads were, ad will make you fall in love with education again or something. Huh?
Fall in love with learning.
Fall in love with learning again, right? So that is not talking only to student. I mean, who wants to fall in love and learning, right? It's only parents. So the one who's paying for it is the one, but they're making it easy for students so that they keep consuming it, which is what they did. And to parents, they're giving this message saying it will be, your kids will be spending more time learning. So you have to do both. User research has to be done on both sides. One more online question.
Yeah. If repetitiveness is the criteria,
Uh-huh.
then industrial automation should be a lucrative market
Yeah.
for funding in India. I see that the customers are happy with employing people even when robots and autonomous
Yeah.
automation is applicable. Is CapEx a reason for this?
Okay. All right. So the question is, if
Repetitiveness.
the repetitiveness is the criteria to put in money.
It's a complex question.
All right, let me read the question. So If repetitiveness is the criteria, then industrial automation should be a large market. But that doesn't happen in India because people are using lower cost people, and is capex the reason for this? Okay, so I think what we need to do is to look at this matrix. So it's when you look at business problems, it's not frequency. It's actually how much money has been invested by them or not, which is a similar input parameter. Frequency is also in this from a consumer side, and on the y-axis is the revenue proximity. So the reason in India people are not using robots as much is because we are still in the industries where actually, so I think the question should be reversed. In high precision industry, everywhere across the world, robots are being used, including in India, right? So that's because that's here. But in a lower skill industry, when you're making, let's say, like tables like this, or not as complicated things, then the skill requirement is lower. It is no longer the revenue proximity is neither direct nor indirect. Then you're actually on the cost side. So when you're on the cost side, then you're actually improving the cost efficiency, and that's where the reluctance comes in, right? And that's basically the reason, not the capex. Capex, it's not capex actually, because one robot does not cost too much to buy. It's 5 lakh rupees. We are buying one robot now. Okay.
One more is.
Okay.
I've heard that iSafe is a legal way to save notes in India. Is
Yeah.
this correct?
I don't know specifically. So question is iSafe a correct way of doing safe notes in India? I don't know the answer to that specifically. I think someone in ARTPARK will know for sure. Safe notes. Safe notes are these where you don't set the price of a round. You raise money from your investors, but let's say you raise $1 million, you don't have to set the price. You don't have to say, just what? I think they're asking, is there a specific thing called iSafe, the right way to do it? I don't know the answer to that. But ARTPARK, someone in ARTPARK will be able to answer. If it's a ARTPARK team, they should be able to get that answer.
Sir, for users session, I would be interested to.
So, okay. So the question is, is there going to be a user research session specifically? No, there won't be a session specifically. But what I wanted to do was people who are going to actually do user research, which I thought was only ARTPARK teams, then I wanted to meet them one-on-one to basically say, this is how you should do it. And, so that we can sit down together, figure out what kind of questions to ask, how to go about doing it. And also subsequently, once you're done the research, to come back and say, okay, what kind of answers have you got? Right, sure. Anyone who's interested, so it's not limited to ARTPARK Spark teams. Anyone who wants to actually do user research, please do it. It is not part of your assignments, but if you want to do it, of course you should do it. If you want to do a startup, you must do it. As we talked about, Tan90 came up with all those possibilities because they talk to hundreds of customers. So I think it's necessary if you want to actually do a startup.